Welcome back to where it all started, the 1950s. So this is the first part of 5 videos in the Vietnam War series. Now these videos will have intros and outros similar to sitcoms of the time period in which the video takes place. The reason for this is because the Vietnam War is the first televised war in history, and this will be the first time American citizens would bear witness to the horrors of war through a screen rather than a newspaper or radio. Though we as Americans know the Vietnam War took place in the 1960s and 70s, the reality is that the war did start in the 1950s, 1955 to be exact. It's just, America did not really enter the war until after the 1950s. So that's why we really just don't associate with the 1950s. And if you came from the 1930s video series, there was supposed to be 3 videos. There were not supposed to be only 2, but YouTube pulled the 3rd one because I don't know why. I guess they were being a little, they were a little sensitive. It was an educational video, but because YouTube, they're like, that's not right. Let's pull it from the YouTube, even though it says educational video in the warning. So I decided not to appeal it because I'm too lazy. So anyway, if any of these videos get pulled from YouTube for any reason, I will appeal the videos because I'm not going to deal with YouTube and their sensitivity. Okay, so what was happening in Vietnam around the time of the 1950s? Well, you kind of need to start in the 1940s during World War II because that's actually when a lot of this stuff did happen because they did have conflicts with Japan and China and that stuff. Not really China, more Japan. But basically after that, there was France got it, and France, they were doing things, and Vietnam didn't like it. So that's really what the start of the Vietnam War is. Pretty simple. It actually really wasn't anything to do with communism or anything. It was kind of dealing with the fact that France owned Vietnam, and Vietnam did not like France owning Vietnam, so Vietnam kicked France out of Vietnam. Okay, so in the 1950s, France was in control of Vietnam. So they were there, they were partying. Basically, it was France mania. That's what it was. Until Vietnam got tired and told France to get out. France did, but not after fighting. When France had control of Vietnam, that was known as French Indochina. And while America was living it up in the suburbs, Vietnam and France were screwing around with each other, and after fucking around with Vietnam, France said, we don't need Vietnam, and went home. Vietnam was happy, they won, and to celebrate they decided to, what else another Asian country did, and split the country in 2 with different governments. And won't fight for full control in the future. What could go wrong? Everything. That's what could go wrong. I mean, what's with these countries doing this? It never goes as planned. The best example was East and West Germany, and they had problems on their own. Like the time America and the Soviet Union almost obliterated the world because of drama. Anyway, so North Vietnam became a communist country while South Vietnam became an anti-communist country. Similar to Korea, America supported the South, and the Soviet Union supported the North. They supported countries like this to try and achieve a mass spread of influence of their government throughout the world. A domino effect was also a wishful achievement for the 2 countries, more so for the Soviet Union than America, but both countries were open to the idea. Oh my god, what the hell was that accent? Like, what the fuck? But only for their form of government. Okay, so it sounds pretty similar to Korea, right? I talk about Korean War in part 2 of the 1950 series, and how the war came to be, and how Vietnam follows a similar path. Please enjoy this step-to-step guide on how to create a war over government control. First, country splits in 2. Second, 2 different governments are formed. Other countries take sides. Arguments ensue. And boom, now you have a Cold War-inspired war. That easy. The Korean War ended in stalemate, so North Korea and South Korea wanted to find success elsewhere, so they joined in supporting their respective Vietnam counterparts. France leaving Vietnam all alone was a huge point in the Soviet Union's corner, because they were able to freely walk in and spread their governmental influence throughout northern part of Vietnam. This was because France and the Soviet Union weren't on the same page, and with France now being absent from the Vietnamese equation, the Soviets didn't have to worry about fighting France to get into Vietnam. Though America was focusing on other things, America knew full well what was happening in the East. With the Red Scare hanging over America, the fear of communism rose. The Red Scare was the fear that there were communist implants within the United States government that were planning a communist takeover of America and the government itself. Now, this never happened, but didn't mean the rumors didn't either. People would point fingers at people they may have not liked, neighbors or just random strangers to say what they heard them complimenting communism, showing support or performing acts that communists would. Think of the Salem witch trials. People would point fingers at disliked people that may have not been in the right state of mind, and say that they were witches. Or think of a point in the French Revolution called the Reign of Terror, where people would point fingers at others saying that they would say something against the government. Events like the Red Scare have happened many times throughout history. I mean, they do say history does repeat itself. Okay, so with Vietnam split in two and on its own, the Soviet Union lurking around with its advertisements for communism, America decided they want to advertise as well. So they advertised to South Vietnam and said, "Come with us, we'll give you money, freedom, and protection." And South Vietnam said, "What the hell?" And America had another little friend to try and one up the Soviet Union. I mean, if the Vietnam War was a freaking basketball game and Team America was South Korea, South Vietnam against Team Soviet Union with North Korea, North Vietnam, neither team would win because both teams would either be dead or too tired from roasting each other. This war on communism reminds me of YouTube beauty community. Drama is flying, there are 30 different sides, and trust is irrelevant. Anyway, Vietnam was irritated with Europe, coming into places and saying, "You mine now," even though the Soviet Union was pretty much doing the same thing. After they successfully drove out France from Vietnam in July of 1954, and in the same month the country split, the Geneva Accords were signed in July of 1954, splitting Vietnam at the 17th parallel. North Vietnam would be ruled by Ho Chi Minh's communist government, and South Vietnam would be led by Emperor Bao Doi. Sorry if I butchered that name. Now, China also played a part in this war as well. China became communist in 1949 and was kind of the Soviet Union's right-hand man, which led to the real start of the war. So basically, the war was first sparked in World War II, where Japanese forces invaded Vietnam. To fight both Japanese occupiers and French colonist administration, political leader Ho Chi Minh, inspired by Chinese and Soviet communism, formed the Viet Minh, or a League of Independence of Vietnam. After Ho's communist forces took over in the north, armed conflict between northern and southern armies continued until the northern Vietnam's decisive victory in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Sorry about that butchering of that name. It's not even worth it anymore. In 1955, the strongly anti-communist politician Ngo Dinh Diem became president of government of Republic of Vietnam. It was also at this point that America solidified its support for Diem and South Vietnam. Now, of course, because this is war, there has to be rebellious groups. In the South, the Viet Cong was born, a rebellious group of South Vietnamese that supported the North's communist ideas, which helped the North reign supreme. By 1957, the Viet Cong and other opponents of Diem's repressive regime began fighting back with attacks on the government officials and other targets. By 1959, they began engaging with the South Vietnamese in firefights. North Vietnam forces began to build a supply route through Laos and Cambodia to South Vietnam in an effort to support guerrilla attacks against Diem's government in the South. The route would become known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail and was greatly expanded and enhanced during the Vietnam War. Now here's a quick little explanation of what the Ho Chi Minh Trail is. Basically, it was a trail that passed through the countries next to Vietnam, which allowed the North to access the South without invading them at the border. This trail is a huge part of the North's victory at the end of the war. Now, though America really didn't come into the Vietnam War until the 1960s, they were smallly involved within the 1950s. Basically, a small amount of American soldiers. Actually, the first Americans were killed in 1959 when guerrillas raided their living quarters near Saigon. Now, I do not mean guerrillas as in guerrilla animals, I mean guerrilla as in guerrilla warfare.
There are times every day as you work or you play when a pause would be welcome to you. And it's then that you find the bright thought in your mind that only a Coke will do.
50 million times a day, at home, at work, or on the way, there's nothing like a Coca-Cola, nothing like a Coke.
Nothing. Nothing else gives you the bracing sparkle and the bright little lift that's so delightfully yours in ice-cold Coca-Cola. Coke has a distinctive flavor all its own that no one has ever succeeded in matching. No wonder Coca-Cola is the most asked-for soft drink in the world.
50 million times a day, at home, at work, or on the way, there's nothing like a Coca-Cola, nothing like a Coke.
Okay, so the war did begin in 1955, and that does leave little room for events during the 1950s, because it was only about 5 years to cover, and there wasn't as much going on as there was in the Vietnam War during the 1960s and 1970s. There was conflict outside of Vietnam, notably with America and the Soviet Union. Basically, the Americans and the Soviets tried to one-up each other. They did this with atomic bombs, the space race, technology, government, militaries. Pretty much, if one country did something, the other did it bigger and better. This was known as the Cold War. Though this was not a declared war on paper, it was declared through different ideologies these countries had. It was called the Cold War because it was not declared. It was more of just seemingly never-ending tension between the two countries and their leaders. I mean, Soviet Union was a dictatorship and America was a democracy. Communism and capitalism are more forms of economy, I believe, than government, because they technically is a republic and a dictatorship. Now, you do still have your communist countries like Cuba and North Korea, though I think North Korea is more communist and Cuba is just kind of like a true dictatorship or something. I'm not really sure. But some of the countries that were communist have changed over government, such as Russia, when Russia became the Russian Federation after the Cold War ended in 1990. By the end of the 1950s, the Vietnam War was in effect, and the end was not in sight. This would teach America lessons like it's never been taught before. The fight for the spread of governmental influence was on fire, and soon a country would be as well. The Vietnam War may have seemed similar to the Korean War, but in reality, the Vietnam War was longer, deadlier, and defeating for the countries involved, whether they won or lost. And this was only the beginning. I mean, America still hasn't really arrived. Did you hear that, America? Get your guns. You're going back to war.